All right. Thank you, Dave. All right, so it is 7:30 on August 19th, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Municipal Light Board. Just as way of introductions, as usual, this meeting is being held by Zoom. It will be recorded and posted on the YouTube channel. We'll continue to use the raise hand functionality and the chat functionality. We'll export that chat discussion and summarize it in the minutes, as we've done in the past. With that, speaking of minutes, we have several sets of minutes that need to be reviewed and approved today by the board. Alice has done a great job editing and sending those around for everyone's review and comments. And so the first set of minutes for review and approval is March 11th. So I'd entertain a motion, or if people have comments on those minutes, we can start with that. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adopt the minutes of March 10th.
Okay, any second?
I believe it's March 11th. Is that right?
March 11th.
Yeah.
Yep, sorry. I wrote 11th.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Gordon?
Aye.
Peggy?
Aye.
Lynn?
Aye.
All right, and I approve. Approved. Okay, so then we'll move on to the next set of minutes, which were for June 10th. Did anyone have additional comments on those minutes? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Again, move to approve the minutes of June 10, 2020.
Thank you, Lynn.
Second.
Thank you, Alice. All right, so take a roll call. Lynn?
Yes.
Alice?
Yes.
Gordon?
Aye.
Peggy?
Yes.
Okay, Wendy approves. So all those are approved. The next set of minutes are for June 24th. Again, any comments or additional questions on those minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the minutes of June 24, 2020.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All right, thanks, Alice. All right, roll call. Lynn?
Yes.
Approval? Yep. Alice?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Peggy?
Yes.
And I approve, so those minutes are approved. And then there was a set of minutes from July 8th that I distributed as clerk. These were necessary because we started the meeting, but then immediately discovered that there was technical difficulties. And so we deferred to July 13th. So we need to technically approve those minutes as well. So, okay, second?
Second.
All right, so roll call. Alice?
Yes.
Peggy?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
All right, Wendy approves. All right, so those minutes are all approved, and I trust we'll get those posted. I know our meeting for July 13th minutes are still in progress, so those will have to wait another month. Okay, well, thank you all. And just a comment, our next meeting is for September 9th. That is prior to town meeting, so if we have any additional comments, discussions before town meeting, we'll have that opportunity. So, and then obviously October 14th and November 18th and December 9th are the subsequent meeting dates. Okay, with that, why don't we move on to the director's update, Dave?
Okay, so the AMI RFP that we've been talking about to bring a consultant in to help craft an RFP to purchase smart meters is in final draft, and we're going to distribute that to the board for comments and suggestions for consideration. So you guys will be seeing that shortly. In place of in-person ride and drive event, we have organized a virtual local dealership roundtable. That's going to happen on October 20th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. It'll feature short presentations from local dealers, followed by opportunities for residents to ask questions and attend online breakout sessions. We'll facilitate test drives at the dealerships for those that are interested. So a little twist in the normal operation. As a result of a survey of EV purchasing intentions sent to our customers, 250 people have asked to be added to the EV program mailing list, so that's really good.
Great.
CMLP will be contracting with Energy New England to provide a heat pump program that will provide our customers with access to heat pump experts, a participating installer list, a quality assurance process for heat pump installations, and E&E will also help market the program. You may have noticed this on the website. We launched new rebate program for electric patio heaters for local restaurants and retailers who are looking to provide warm outdoor areas in the fall. So details about that program can be found on our website. But you know, we're trying to help the retailers and the restaurants go to an electric choice over a propane heating unit. So that's hopefully it works out the way we think it might. A little over a week ago, we had a major power outage at Emerson Hospital. The outage was caused by a squirrel, got into the switchgear, caused a 3-phase flashover, caused some major damage. We've ordered the parts. I believe they're at our distributor, so we should have them this week. Then we'll start the permanent repairs, but the hospital's running on its backup circuit. We already tested the old cables, but they're not old, but the main cables that go to the hospital, they're fine. So we could use those right now if we needed to. But the outage was pretty significant, and it caused a problem with the broadband system. You may have heard, but we had a pretty big broadband outage, and we did get some feedback that communication around the broadband outage was not sufficient, and I don't disagree with that, and with the team, and we've talked about how to address that moving forward. So I believe we're all set in that area, but it was pretty significant.
Dave, can you speak to what that communication strategy is? I know I got calls and I told people to hold tight. I know that you guys were working on it.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it was like the perfect storm. You know,
Yeah.
I was away, and I had intermittent internet access, and Joe, the assistant director, was at Emerson Hospital, and Greg, telecommunications director, was focused on the repair with his staff, and so it was just a disconnected thing. And essentially, you know, we've talked about that, and you know, we really should have got some stuff up on the website, and we should have got stuff out on Twitter. I did get something out on Twitter once I finally had a connection, but it was just, you know, the team needs to be more aware, including myself, of when we have something like this, people are looking for information, and you know, it was one of those things. It was a good thing that opened our eyes up to the fact that we knew it was happening, but we didn't do a great job getting information out, and recognize that. And, you know, we've talked about how to adjust that. So, you know, going forward, if we have, you know, it was one of those scenarios that shouldn't happen frequently. I mean, it was a very unique thing. I mean, we had a squirrel get into a sealed switchgear because there was a little gap, and it caused some major damage. And, you know, the impact of that, you know, was obviously an outage at the hospital. And the team was working on the broadband piece, but everyone was focused on getting everyone back up and wasn't paying attention to just get a quick note out. So it was a unique scenario, but I think we're well positioned going forward.
Dave, I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm curious about is if there's a widespread outage, how can we communicate if we don't have internet to either see Twitter or get on the web page?
Alice, you ask some very difficult questions sometimes.
It was actually, Dave, the people who called me were
Reverse
calling
911.
about that. And what they asked for is at least there should be a message on your phone system. So at least when they're calling to report something, they recognize that you had some kind of outage. So,
Yeah, and you know, that's, the phone system is we're in the process. Greg's working on upgrading it. It's antiquated. And that's one of the things that's going to be nice about the new system is that we can put messages up there. You know, our help desk, our 24-hour help desk is outsourced. And, you know, if you called, it was working. It was down the day before we got it working, but there were so many people calling in, they couldn't get through. And that was the main source of frustration.
Yep.
So, you know, again, most people have access to Twitter on their phones. Most people can get on the internet. So, you know, we'll get stuff up on the internet, you know, through our social media channels and the town website. And you know, hopefully we've figured out a way to keep everyone at least informed.
Is it an appropriate use of the reverse 911 system? I know people don't want to have that overburdened with non-important messaging, but I'm wondering whether this would qualify as something of significant import to be able to use the reverse 911.
We haven't used it for that, but I want to talk with the senior management team for the town to see who's using it. I don't want to set a precedent.
I agree.
But it is a good suggestion.
thanks, Dave. Okay.
That's my update.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you for the update.
Oh, hold on.
Yep.
Nope, I got it. I just wanted to check my notes.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the 2020 annual town meeting, and we wanted to have a discussion about which articles we should review and obviously support or have some further discussion on. And this is a little tricky because I know the consent calendar is, I don't know if that's final, and there's been a lot of articles that are being deferred, but maybe we could start with what we know will be on the agenda, which is Article 17 for the light plant and pilot. Dave, do you want to start there? I know we've.
Yeah, I mean, our Article 17 should be on the consent calendar. I did send some stuff in to the town manager's office this week, you know, a brief summary of it. So I don't expect any issues there. I believe the consent calendar's going to be larger this year than it is, obviously, having a town meeting and whatnot. You know, I think the big thing for us is on the consent calendar with Article 17, if for some reason it got pulled off, Wendy, you'd have to present it as the chair of the light board. I'd be there to support you with questions and whatnot. But I don't see any issues there.
Yeah.
It really comes off the consent calendar.
Yeah.
And I think the larger question is, are there other articles that the light board wants to take a position on? You know, if you do, that's fine. You know, we don't have to do it today, but the next light board meeting's before town meeting. So you know, we could defer if we needed to till then.
Right. So let me ask Alice, because I know I looked on the July 17th select board. There was a identification of some articles that were going to be deferred. And I thought that the fossil fuel and the municipal fleet electrification was going to be deferred. But Alice, you had maybe some more current information on an article that was expected to be presented at town meeting.
So here's what I think I know, and I think I see Stephen as a participant, so he can also fill in. I think it's Article 30, which is a school bus electrification project, is going to move forward. There was a very lengthy discussion last night at the public hearing about that article. Some of it was very interesting in terms of who should pay, but it seems to, that went through the Finance Committee's hearing last night, and it was approved they voted to support Article 30, which is the school bus electrification. So that's an article that I would suggest that we have to take a position on because it has a direct impact on the light plant, because it's actually not about purchasing school buses. It's for installation of the infrastructure to allow for vehicle to grid charging. And that has a direct impact on the grid management that we would have to have a role in. So that would be an article I would suggest that we take a position on.
Yeah.
Article 40 is the electrification of buildings. We received an unfavorable ruling on the Brookline move. That was very similar to what we were moving forward with. While the AG agreed in principle and would like to see building electrification moving forward, there was state law that contradicted our ability to do that. So we have deferred Article 40 to a future town meeting when some of these other issues can be resolved. So those are the two, and I believe the town is hiring a consultant that would address the municipal fleet in general, and that had been proposed as a petition article, and it's now being taken in by the select board and the town as a consultant study to understand the entire municipal fleet electrification. Did I get that right, guys? Stephen or
Yeah,
Mike?
sure. Good morning, everyone. So I would add that the select board also endorsed Article 30 at its meeting last night that happened after the Finance Committee public hearing. And I would say, I don't know, it was a few months ago now, but I did report to the board that upon their directive/recommendation that we would start with a fleet electrification study, and our sustainability director, Kate Hanley, was starting that off and was going to work with department heads, but then has identified a grant that can enable us to hire a consultant who is an expert in this, in fleet electrification studies, which is, I mean, Kate is more than qualified, I think, to do to manage the study, but having someone who can come in here and knows, that industry at a level of depth that's greater than probably most of us, I think would make it a lot more efficient. So that grant was just submitted, I think, earlier this week. So that will be moving forward. I do agree with Alice. The discussion about the electrification of the bus fleet does have an impact on the light plant. And so I just think and I think this is a matter of public record. I think there's an expectation that the light plant will support the electrification of that fleet with resources. So that's, I think, I tried to make it clear that the light board has a couple of irons in the fire, cost of service study or rate study. So now's not the time, and the reserves aren't just there just for whatever purpose people come up with on a given day. But looking ahead, should the electrification of both the school bus fleet and the overall fleet, and a role that CMLP can play in facilitating that, should that be a topic of conversation going forward? I would suggest yes, it should.
Steve, thanks. I see a comment about that grant. Dave, can you, I didn't see the whole chat. There was a question about the source of the grant. Can you speak to that?
I could, if I could remember where the funding came from. I did review the grant application and I signed it and sent it back to Kate Hanley. I mean, if you wanted me to go look it up, I could, but it's a pretty small amount of money.
Okay.
I want to say it's $12,000 or $13,000. And I don't remember if it was MAPC or not, but I could find out and get back to you.
Okay, well, we can follow up. All right, great. Thank you for that comment. So, Dave, is appropriate as the board, I think, could certainly take a vote and support Article 17. That would seem appropriate.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Is there any discussion about it? I know we've seen your presentation, and just a comment, it's both the budget as well as the pilot in this
Correct.
one article, right? So,
Yeah.
Move to approve Article 17. Move to vote affirmative action on Article 17.
Second.
Was that Alice?
Lynn.
Oh,
And-
Lynn, thanks. Sorry. Just trying to make sure we keep track of those votes.
Wendy?
yeah.
You do have a question, a hand up, if you want me to allow that person to ask their question.
Okay. So I see the question on the grant, and I'm trying to figure out I can't see the question. I'm sorry. I'm like really not great at this.
Laura Burns had her hand up.
Yep.
I've allowed her to talk, so.
Oh, to ask. Okay, so
Thanks.
Laura,
I think you already answered my question. Thank you.
I thought so in the question. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. All right. So returning to our discussion, I've got a motion and a second to approve in the affirmative Article 17 for the light plant. So I'd like to take a roll call. Alice,
Yes.
Gordon,
Yes.
Peggy,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Wendy approves. So, all right, that's fully supported. Do we want to have a discussion on the Article 40? Since that is being moved forward. Alice, do you want to
Article
add
30.
anything else? Article 30.
Article 30. Right? Is that the right number for the school bus?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 40 is being deferred. 30, or is it 31? It's 30.
I'm
I thought it was 32.
30.
No, it's Article
Steven
30.
says 30.
Okay, yeah,
It's Article
to
30.
change. So that's why I'm asking. So it's Article 30.
So I move to vote in support of Article 30.
Second.
Is that Lynn? That's Peggy?
Yeah.
Just checking. All right. Okay, I'll take a roll call. Lynn?
Could I ask a question first, please?
Absolutely.
I did not attend the hearing, unfortunately. What are the budget ramifications of this for the light plant?
Good question.
So, the article is sponsored by a citizen, Brian Folds, who I know is well known to all of you, and I'm sure he's here today. But I think the I think there is some. I don't want to speak for his assumptions and the ramifications. I would just say that in terms of fleet ramifications, the buses are obviously more expensive than diesel buses, so there's an impact potentially to acquisition costs for the school department. And I think one of the key points that was made in terms of CMLP's role in the electrification of the bus fleet, or to the town, like I said, you can take this to CPW dump trucks too, is that CMLP doesn't buy school buses, and I'm completely ripping off Brian's words here, and the school department doesn't do grid services. And so this article, the intent of the article is to create a nexus point for the school to provide school buses or purchase school buses that can also provide peak demand, grid services. So, and he gave a presentation that if you go back and watch the videos, I thought it was a good presentation. So I think and I guess, and Alice made this point last night, I think you'd have to look at the pilot project that we did to see, are there projections that could be made?
And then, Dave, I recall earlier discussions that you suggested that our infrastructure could support it. Is that still a fair system assumption?
Yep. Yeah, we can support it.
Right.
The biggest thing for us is we'd want to manage when they're charged.
Right.
And, so that's really where we come in. Laura could tell you guys about and how much it costs. She's done some analysis on that, but it's not favorable to charge during the peak periods, costing the ratepayers money.
Yep.
Really want to push the charging to off-peak.
Yep.
Dave, would the charging stations also, would the cost of the charging stations also be supported by the respective departments?
Yes.
Okay. That was the main cost I thought of.
Do we have the appropriate grid management software to manage the vehicle to grid part of the functionality that the interest of this petitioner has?
I think that's the piece that needs some development still. When we went after the first bus, that was the piece that interested the light plant, and why we partnered up in it. because we were interested in getting some data and learning about charging the bus and then using that during vacation weeks and whatnot to offset peaks. That technology hasn't come far enough along yet, but it is still something that interests us, and I think it's something we should keep our eye on.
So are we suggesting that the purchase of these buses and the use of vehicle to grid has not matured enough to consider it as a supply side to our grid system? I mean, if
think
we
at
have
this-
2 buses that have vehicles to grid, what is the impact on our grid?
Yeah, at this point, I don't think it's quite there yet, but
Yeah.
it's something that we shouldn't lose focus on, because it certainly is something that is attractive to us. If a bus is sitting there and it's fully charged and it's not going to be used for a week, we should be looking at that to try and pull that energy to offset our peaks. And we still want to be focused on that.
So will the consultant study address any of that infrastructure piece?
I think the focus of the consultant study is really on finding vehicles. I mean, the easy part of the study is administrative vehicles.
Yep.
The harder part is backhoes, heavier duty
trucks.
dump trucks, things
Yeah.
like that. I mean, I know that there are some vehicles, some heavy duty vehicles that have been electrified. The viability of those, I'm not 100% certain on, but I think the point of the study is what's viable, what can we implement today? And we've replaced a lot of vehicles. I mean, the police department's moving up to hybrid interceptors. I know that electrified interceptors would be better, but I think it's what is the expense and the viability and the reliability and the use history on those vehicles. And so I think that's not, that may be it may tie to it. I think there are certainly transferable components to town fleet electrification and bus fleet electrification. But the biggest thing, and I think this point was made by, school committee member, scalability, I think is really what we're talking about. And so when you get caught out in scalability questions, I don't mean to go on about this, but is 2 buses or 3 buses going to really move the needle on this? Maybe not. But if you replace 40 buses, now you're dealing with something. And Dave and I have heard this analogy, the best time to plant an oak tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And so I think it's something as Dave said, we got to be moving towards, even if we're not 100% certain of the technology today. We have to get to that scalability, because I think at least I know enough to know that it will be effective if you get to scale.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly part of our overall town strategy and light plan strategy. So from that perspective, I'd agree. Okay, any more discussion, questions on that article? Okay.
This electrification would be at the Knox Trail site.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to speak for the petitioner, but my understanding, based on the presentation, that it's infrastructure installed at Knox Trail.
All right. Alice, I believe that you made a motion in support of this. Was there a second?
Second.
Second, Peggy, thank you. All right, I'll take a roll call. Gordon?
Yes.
All right. Lynn?
Yes.
All right. Alice?
Yes.
Peggy?
Yes.
And Wendy's in support. So, all right, thank you all. So we're certainly voting in the affirmative for the Article 30. I think those are the articles that people were most concerned about. There is our meeting on the 9th in September if there's an additional discussion folks want to have for additional articles. Unless there are others that I haven't heard. Okay. All right, well, with that, let's move on. So our next item is the cost of service study. I know that materials were sent to all the team members in advance, and I see Russell is here. So I assume Russell will take the lead on our next agenda presentation.
Yeah,
All right,
Russ,
well,
you should be able to share your screen. If
All right, let me get that set up here.
Right on time.
Right, amazing.
Can you folks see a PowerPoint on your screens as well?
Yep.
All right. Well, first off, I want to thank you for having me back and also for changing your meeting date to accommodate my schedule. I greatly appreciate that. We had a long time thing planned that we wanted to get in before school started, and appreciate your indulgence in that as well. So you might recall our meeting from July, where we talked about we gave you like an interim update of the project and the things that had transpired to that point. We talked a bit about cost of service and revenue requirement and things like that. And now we're in the home stretch here, and the discussion today will be more about the rate design and all of that. But before that, I just wanted to give a little recap of what we've done here, talk about some of the rate design highlights, and then our observations and recommendations, and then open it up for discussion as we go here. So I know we only have 45 minutes, so I'll keep things moving as I would anticipate some questions on the various areas. Now, we had submitted a first draft report to y'all. Hopefully you had a chance to just kind of peruse the executive summary, and that's a lot of what I'm going to cover here as well. But there's a lot of detail and things you probably don't need or want to get into support for the rates and things like that. Although if you want to dig into the details, they're there as well. And then one thing I want to say is that working with Laura has been outstanding with her knowledge and insights and all of that. There's no way that we could have put this together, her and Matt as well, but mainly her on insights into rates and how CMLP works, and your load curves for all your customer classes, your concerns as a board and as a body. And we try to factor all that and work that into the report and into the various components and pieces of it as well. Okay, so to this date, we've delivered a draft report, as I said, with a revenue requirement, cost of service, and rate design study. And also we've delivered not a final, but a rate design model, which is something that in the future, when we go away as a consulting firm from working for you, that you'll have this tool available to tweak the rates and do other things that you would like to do based on the parameters of the model. And again, that's something that Laura helped us mold and model as well, but it's specifically tailored to CMLP for future in-house use as you go ahead. Okay. So just to recap from last time, the rate making process really has three different components. First off, you develop a revenue requirement. How much money do you need to run the utility for 1 year into the future or several years into the future? And the rates are developed and designed based on this revenue requirement for the 5-year period of 2020 to 2025. And what you do then is you take those revenue requirements and you develop a cost of service study. And the cost of service study is based on the billing characteristics of each one of your customer classes, residential, general service, and all of the others are, the hourly data, the monthly data, and so on is used to develop, what does it actually cost you at this point in time to serve those various customer classes. And the thing with the cost of service is that it will change over time as your customer usage patterns change. Some areas will grow, some will shrink, times of day will vary, and things like that. So, the cost of service is not a static event, but it is, in a study like this, by its nature, it must be kind of made a snapshot of where the cost of service is of CMLP today. And you use that data then to determine, what classes are at their cost of service, which classes are under their cost of service. So you have these cross-class subsidies that are there at the present time that can change over time as well. And all that feeds into your rate design philosophy and your strategic goals and all of that going forward. So you take that cost of service and you develop a rate based on direction from the board, based on race philosophy and things like that. So the cost of service, the rate design doesn't necessarily exactly match the cost of service. And that's just the nature of the electric business. Since rates have been designed, since electricity was developed, utilities wrestle with that various areas. A moving target and then also the philosophy, and plus we have decades of embedded rate philosophy at CMLP, as well as does any utility, and those things are not easy to change on a dime. Okay. So we take that revenue requirement, and then you look at your cost of service objectives. You allocate the revenue requirement to the customer classes, as I said, based on the load curves and cost causation principles. You identify those rate class subsidies, and then the end goal is to ensure your revenue stability and adequate cash flow to meet your strategic objectives, fund operations, fund capital improvements, and pay your debt service as well, and provide a return for being in the electric business. Now, the revenue requirement is slightly different than our presentation in July. As I worked with Laura on this, we've kind of tweaked things as we've gone ahead here, but this is the latest iteration of the revenue requirement for CMLP for the year, what we call a test year, the year of analysis, main year of analysis. And you see that number in blue at the bottom of your screen there, and all the various categories that make up that revenue requirement. And we took that revenue requirement, and there's some rounding differences in this schedule here, but these are this is the cost of service, which is the revenue requirement, and then it's allocated to the various customer classes, as you see there on the left, based on those load curves and analysis. And that's how we develop this, how we develop the cost of service for each customer class. We compare that to what the forecasted revenues are at current rates. And you see that, as we discussed in July, some classes are over their cost of service, mainly in the general service area. Others, residential, are under their cost of service, and other variations you see in here, big percentages over here are driven by smaller dollars and things like that. So it's all relative as well. So this is a little different than what you saw in July, but not much from that. Those class differences are the same. The numbers are slightly different.
Can I just confirm, this is, what year is this, 19?
20. This is based on the revenue requirement for 20.
Forecast.
Okay, so this is, okay, forecast.
Yep.
Not actual.
Mm-hmm. So forecast, even though we're, almost 3/4 of the way through 20, this is, the based on the latest data that we have.
Yep.
So, based on that, you get to the rate design piece of this. And again, standard disclaimers are, you should have frequent cost of service studies to allow the rates to move towards the cost of service or your rate philosophy, because as I said, the cost of service is a moving target. It moves slightly every year based on how your customers use electricity, and sometimes you'll design rates to send price signals to your customers, and they'll take those price signals and they'll change how they use electricity, and that will change the cost of service. So it's kind of like a circular reference almost. But the end goal is to meet your strategic plan and make sure that your rates fit with that. And so in the rate design process, you develop revenue targets for each class, and then you develop rates based on those parameters for the revenue targets for each class. So after our last meeting in July, we received this direction from the board on the rate design, and we used that input into developing the rates that are in the report that we had sent to you. So the direction was that residential and general service, these rate classes should maintain their differential between the forecasted revenues and the cost of service. The small G1 rates should be decreased to meet competitiveness with area utilities. Other rate classes should move towards their cost of service. Seasonal rates were desired, and also desired was a residential opt-out time of use rate with a customer demand charge, and finally a return on rate base, which drives dollars that you use for debt service and capital improvements and so on. That rate of return should be about 2.5%, and that kind of equates to cost of capital in today's financial markets, kind of your cost of debt and so on. So the rate structures that are different in this study from your current rate structure, again, we have designed winter summer rates with higher winter rates that reflect your cost in the market as well. We have that residential opt-out time of use rate that is included. And there's also an electric vehicle charging subscription rate as you move to more electrification, desire to have more electric vehicles, and recognize that that is something that's going to impact many utilities. You're taking the lead on that. And there aren't many rates out there like this, but it's something that is included in there, and it's kind of interesting development as part of this study. So what I wanted to do in the next couple of slides, well, not the next couple of slides, is I want to go to a couple of pages in the report because they don't translate well with slides. So let's take a look at these as well. So if you can see a table on your screen now.
Yep, you can see it.
Oh, okay, all right. My Zoom skills are improving here after all these months. So, for example, what we did for each class, and you can take a look at these, is we looked at looked at the revenues from your current rates, and then based on that, in these design changes, we developed what we call a base rate. So in other words, you want to have an initial rate design that matches the revenues from current rates so that you have a good foundation, that they match, that all the parameters are right based on the load characteristics, the usage, all of that going forward. And so you design that base rate, especially now you're moving to winter and summer rates here, as you see on the left here. You still have the tiered rate. The tiers have changed slightly as your customer averages have changed slightly. And so you take those parameters and the rates are designed out through 2025. Okay? And one of your strategic other goals was to move more costs to the fixed portion of the customer bill from the variable portion, the kilowatt hour portion of that. And many utilities are doing that, recognizing that you have other factors in play. As customer usages change, you still have, and you have net metering and those types of customers as well, but you still have a fixed infrastructure cost to serve your customers. It costs so much to connect them, to maintain that infrastructure, to build them, and so on. So many utilities are moving towards getting more of those types of costs in the customer charge. And there's a section in the, and we talked about this in July too, about the fixed meter charge compared to what it actually should be and so on. It's not realistic to move directly to that. But in the rates here, we've kind of tried to move the fixed charges up as part of the overall rates. So you can see class by class, and we're not going to go through this in any great detail here, but we have the residential rates, and every rate has its parameters laid out, the 5-year forecast or 5-year recommendation. But the one rate that is, I'll go through some of the rates that are new here as well. So this is the residential time of use rate R1 tour, okay? Time of use rate. So right now you have a small group of customers that are on your time of use rate. And that's great because that gives you some ideas and parameters around how customers will behave when they have that kind of rate. And I forget, I think it's under 50 customers right now that are on that rate. And so you get the early adopters when you have a new rate like this, and the folks that are, they're going to pay attention to what time of the day it is and when they're using electricity and trying to minimize their bill and so on. And that's great. And the difference here is that you desired to go to an opt-out time of use rate. So in other words, every residential customer would be part of this rate class unless they decided to opt out of the rate class. So the way the rates are designed is that customers in here, in this rate class, we developed the rates winter, summer. It includes a customer demand charge, which as you get more smart meters, you will be able to measure that type of usage for your customers and then, bill demand as well as a meter charge. And if customers opt out of this rate, then they would pay approximately 4% more in your new R1 residential rate. Now, the way we estimated this is there aren't a lot of utilities that have an opt-out time of use rate. So I commend you for going in this direction because that's where everybody else is going, and it's going to end up there. And the opt-out percentage that we used for this rate is about 4% based on a study of another large municipal utility that was done. But I would urge you, as you move to this type of rate, you hook more customers up, you need more data, I think, to make sure that the parameters that are laid out in this rate will provide you with the revenues that you need and are looking for in this type of rate structure. The other thing in this rate, it's winter, summer, and it has, you know, on peak, off peak. You see the periods here on the left, it kind of matches your load curve for that. So your winter peak is about 4 to 8 p.m. So off peak is the rest of the day. In summer, it has a 3 peak period. So peak period of the day is also 4 to 8. And it has a rate for what we call the mid peak. So the time of the day when the load is increasing and the time of the day when the load is decreasing, and then an off peak rate of midnight to 8 a.m. So that's one major change in your rate structure. So again, I can't urge you enough. You need more data, I think, for smooth implementation of this, or you implement it and you just keep an ongoing analysis on a regular basis to make sure that the revenues are recovering your revenue targets.
Can I just put clarification? The opt-out, I felt the opt-out was opting out of the smart meter. And is that what you're reflecting, opting out of the time of use because you've opted out of the smart meter?
Well,
No.
yeah, that would
No.
cause you to opt out. I don't know the driver behind that.
They're two separate issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a person who has a smart meter and doesn't mind having a smart meter might still not want to go on the time of use rate. And so they're going to be given an option to opt out. But what you're talking about, Peggy, is a person who's making the choice about what type of meter they want. And do they want the standard meter that has radio frequency embedded in it or some other type of meter? So that's almost a decision that's made before the decision on which rate class they want to go to.
Okay.
But two choices to make.
Laura, can a person opt out of a time of use rate and not have a smart meter? I thought smart meter was needed for time of use rate.
Well, if they opted out, then they would not be, you mean
Eligible.
opt in, but opt out of the smart meter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so to be on a time of use rate, you need a smart meter.
Right, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yes.
So Laura, the R1 rate becomes the default for someone who doesn't have a smart meter, the tour rate?
The R1 becomes the default rate for those who opt out of the tour rate. And the idea is that we do intend to make it about 4% higher than the opt-in rate in order to encourage people to stay in the opt-in.
Thank you. That's what I thought.
What? I must have, maybe I just either missed it or forgot. Why would people opt out of their tour rate if they have a smart meter?
They might
Don't want to be constrained by, right, Laura? They don't want to be constrained by having to think about when they're using their appliances.
yeah, they might be concerned that, maybe they're one of the people that uses all of their energy during the peak period. And if they go to the differentiated pricing, they're going to end up paying higher than they did before.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And then, all right, thank you for those questions. And
then can I just ask you, Jan just asked a question about the peak time frame there. Is it 12 a.m. to, not 12, it's not 12 p.m., it's 12 a.m., right, to 8 a.m. off peak?
oh, geez, yeah. Nice catch.
Okay, just want to clarify.
That's a good thing we're still in draft. Okay. Iteration, whatever of this, yeah. You missed some obvious stuff. It is 12 a.m. Yes, it is.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And you can see the differences in, peak, mid-peak, off-peak. The per kilowatt hour charge is pretty substantial. So it would get your attention. And as Laura said, I mean, if you don't want to think about that, or if you determine when you need to use electricity, maybe maybe there's a benefit to being in the regular R1 rate for your particular situation. But you'll have groups of customers that pay strict attention to this. There'll be, customers in the beginning that don't realize where they are with this, and you'll get calls that say, hey, what's going on with my electric bill and things like that. So there'd be, we would recommend an education process as you move toward this. And then the rest of the, the schedules in here, this appendix here is pretty lengthy, but it has class by class what the rates are. And these were the major changes in that too, as well as the electric subscription charging rate, which we have down here, which is a proposal to allow your customers to pay a flat monthly fee to charge their electric vehicles as much as they want, assuming most folks will do it off-peak.
The off-peak for vehicle charging seems like it's different than the off-peak for time of use rates. How does that work together? Or are we changing time of use, the off-peak hours for EV charging?
I'm not sure I follow the question. This charge would be a flat monthly fee that customers would use, or would pay rather, to charge their vehicles when they wish to.
So if you choose to charge on peak every day, your rate would be set by a subscription that you pay, as opposed to having the ability to charge off peak and have a lower rate.
Well, so some folks could make that analysis and say, it's cheaper for me to not use this rate and be on the tour rate and just do it that way through my regular bill. Mm-hmm. You'd have to do that comparison. The rate here was designed basically based on the majority of your off-peak rate plus energy plus distribution, mm-hmm. and so on.
So I just want to make sure the question I was asking was the current time of use rate off-peak charging for EVs is from, I believe, 10 p.m. to noon, which are a different set of off-peak hours than mm-hmm. is being proposed in the time of use rates.
Right.
Will we be changing the EV charging rate so that it begins at midnight?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I'm a little slow here. Yes, that would, the rates, and yes, it would reflect the same time periods.
So we would have some education to do for EV users.
Well,
Yes.
Not to muddy the waters further, but Russ, wouldn't it be correct to say that going forward, in place of the TOU rate that people have been using for their cars, there will not be a TOU rate for cars in the future. It will be the same default TOU rate that customers have the choice to use for their entire house. The new subscription model that Russ is mentioning here is not for a new EV time of use rate with different time periods and different prices per kWh. It's a rate of convenience for electric vehicle owners whereby they can charge, they pay one fixed monthly amount, and then they can charge their car as much as they want.
Whenever they want.
Yeah, that part we haven't entirely worked out yet, but
Mm-hmm.
presumably yes.
So if they choose to charge at peak, say at 4 in the afternoon or 6, that could end up costing the light plant considerable amounts of energy
Well,
use and increase the overall peak use.
So we may, I mean, we have some assumptions based on how we did the pricing on what percent of peak and off peak they would actually charge, but we may, as you point out, prefer to go with, okay, here's your fixed monthly subscription fee and it's fairly low, but it all has to be done off peak.
Mhm.
But that rate is different. It's a fixed monthly charge. We'd be eliminating the current time of use rate because we're getting this new big customer class time of use rate.
Does it require its own meter the way that EV charging currently does?
It would.
Mm.
So Laura, did you see this with other light plants, or Russ, maybe you can answer. So to your point, it's a convenience charge, right? So for those who don't want to manage the specific timing, is it a trend in the marketplace currently?
I haven't seen a lot of it or very much of it, but then again, EV and EV rates are developing and things like that. I mean, other utilities offer, they have EV chargers that can only work off peak, those types of things, and others use time of use parameters like the tour rate, the time of use rate, things like that. So this is something we haven't seen a lot of, but it's kind of intriguing. And as you get more and more electric vehicles, it might be, a draw for your customers. And, as Laura said, some of the areas are being analyzed yet to make sure that it doesn't leave, that it's fair for the customer and fair for CMLP as well. And reflects the cost of service.
I don't believe we would be the first utility to implement this. I believe there are a handful of others, but it's a small group. We're on the cutting edge as we are on some other of the rate structures.
Yeah.
Laura, would an 8-hour period be adequate to fully recharge most cars on the market today?
Provided they have at least level 2 charging capability, I would answer yes.
Does it matter if you were trying to charge 2 cars at the same time?
Mm.
With the same infrastructure, I imagine yes.
As long as they both have level 2 charging stations.
It's not like water when 2 people want to take a shower at the same time. I mean, there'd be adequate flow to the home.
That's really a question about their electric infrastructure.
Right.
You have the right stuff in place, 2 charging stations, the right size service, it's a non-issue. If they didn't and they could only handle 1, then it kind of gets into that water issue that you were referring to.
Okay.
And that subscription rate would apply per vehicle owned by a customer. So if
Correct.
you own 2 vehicles that are EVs, then you pay twice that. You have 2 subscriptions.
Right.
And that would require 2 meters if you have 2 charging stations at home.
Yes.
And the customer pays for the installation of the meter and the cost of the meter?
They don't pay for the cost of the meter. They are responsible for some costs associated with installing the meter, such as having a meter socket installed at their home into which the meter is placed. But then CMLP has traditionally been paying for and providing the meters and installing the meters once the meter socket is in place.
Okay.
Just a quick comment, Russ. It seems to me that the Concord's current time of use is mostly used by EV owners, and I understand there's probably only 1 residence in Concord that is using it for the whole house. But it seems to me also that if we move people to time of use, then that would be an opportunity to let them charge their cars without buying a new meter, which can be convenient and might make it easier for people to make the transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. I mean, your EV usage is fairly low right now, but as it grows over time, the data that you have from that will give you a better analysis foundation so that you can determine
Yeah, it also
what are your
means, I
costs
think,
for this.
excuse me, it also means that the curves that we've given you for time of use patterns here in Concord probably reflect EV users or EV chargers rather than what the behaviors would be if ordinary households switched to time of use.
Okay, thank you.
Laura, it's Wendy. Can you just speak to that? I thought we supplemented some of our experience from local utilities on tour.
So as you all probably remember, for some of the basic load curves here, we took data from nearby utilities, namely Eversource in this geographic area. But when it became time to look at very CMLP specific programs such as time of use, we did not rely upon the load shape data from the sister utility and instead used our own load shapes because we had smart meter data on them. And so we provided Baker Tilly with a grouping of customers that fell within different categories. So for time of use, we gave them the roughly 46, load curves from those customers that have signed up for TOU for their car, and the 6 customers that have signed up for TOU for their house. So they were able to look at those 2 different load shapes, if you will, to kind of tease out how does the usage of the time of use rate differ between car users and whole house users.
Laura,
Is that your question?
Yes, it was. Thank you.
During the COVID shutdown, those rate curves,
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Peggy?
were the rate curves that you provided, were they taken between March and June of this year when many businesses were closed?
No, they were all provided prior to the start of the year.
Great.
So they were, 2019, 2018 data sets.
Excellent. Thank you.
There's a question in the chat from Jim Terry. Can somebody?
Questioner. Jim.
Well, the question is, how will solar generation impact time of use rates?
Well, solar generation, you have a certain base amount of solar customers right now, and how will they impact the time of use rates? We didn't really forecast any change in your solar customer usage from what it is right now, and that's why going forward, as you get more solar penetration and distributed generation penetration, as part of the rate process, you need to analyze that on an ongoing basis. So, solar generation shaves your peak, and, it is beneficial or neutral at the minimum to the kilowatt hour part of that. You still have the distribution fixed costs that you have for solar customers that you should recover from them. And that's built into your current solar rates.
We haven't discussed this yet, but my recommendation will be that for solar and other distributed generation producers, CMLP provide one-for-one valuation of energy going to and from. So for example, if energy costs 10 cents a kilowatt hour being delivered to the solar home when it needs more than it's producing, okay, during a certain time of the day, let's say that's noon, that energy coming back from that facility would be valued at 10 cents at that time of day. And likewise, if there is a demand charge assessed for the customer, that the amount of capacity we actually get back from that customer, if that can be worked out, would be compensated at the same rate that it is charged by CMLP. So basically, I'm talking about a one-for-one mirror valuation for solar producers.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, is currently the valuation on excess production is, it does get some beneficial treatment because there's banking. But once you've gotten past the banking and you've just got excess that you're feeding back into the grid, that's credited at a pretty low rate. It's like the day ahead rate that typically averages out to about 2 cents. So what I'm hearing you say is that this would be a little bit more generous, but take away the banking.
That would be one way to set it up, you know, and I don't think we've fully baked exactly how that would work. But the question was asked, you know, sort of how will this time of use in general impact solar? And my thought was that the desire to get to, and some of this may be dependent upon the smart meters, desire to get to a place where we can pay one for one what we charge for the energy going to and coming from, and the capacity going to and coming from.
Laura, there's a question from Jim Terry around the capacity to capture when solar is generated and put into the rate calculations. I'm assuming that that's a dependency on our smart meter.
That's correct.
Okay, just to clarify that. Okay. Again,
Can I ask a question about fixed charges? So I was surprised to see the meter charge is only proposed to be raised from $12 to 20.42. I also saw a demand charge. And I'm wondering, Russ, can you tell us if you were to fully translate all fixed charges of the plant into the meter charge, what would that cost of service be?
I think our cost of service shows, and I have to look back at the details. I think it's closer to $75 per month for a residential customer.
And is the expectation that we continue to raise that over time? I feel like going from 12 to 20 is just moving the needle a little bit.
Well, it is, but you know, it's difficult to have large jumps in the fixed cost over a short period of time. Well, you could do it, but you would get a lot of customer feedback and from groups of customers and things like that. And again, you decide how you'd like to address those, but you see more and more utilities moving their fixed charges gradually up to reflect some of that, recognizing that that's a difficult number to move in a big jump at one point in time.
But at the same time as you're raising your meter charge, you're also dropping your rates, presumably, right? It's a closed.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
I mean, so that's a fairly easy explanation, I would think, to deliver to the public.
Yeah, I would agree. If I worked in a vacuum on this too, you probably double that initial meter charge and take it from there, I would say. But
well, wait, hold it. You're talking about how we need to have a higher fixed rate, but we're also talking about introducing a demand charge, which we never used to have. And that's another way of distributing overhead and the cost of infrastructure equitably. The problem that I've had with the idea of just a blanket increase in the fixed meter charge across all users is that it would shift the burden of running the plant from people who are currently very large users to everybody having to pay an equal share. And I don't see a justification for, no one's shown me why it is that it's unfair for a house that spends tens of thousands of dollars on their electric bill that they should pay $70 a month instead.
well, yeah, that's another argument as well. And the demand charge, which the demand charge does not cover the even a large portion of the demand that customers in each class place on CMLP system, but that demand charge is a step in that direction too. We have a 5-year window. If we look out for a 10-year window, perhaps you want to tie the fixed customer charge more towards those fixed costs of billing and distribution and things like that, which aren't fully reflected in that customer charge, and keep boosting that demand charge so that those customers that are paying higher demand do pay more for their portion of the cost of maintaining the system or operating the system. But the key in all this is having the smart meters. Right now, there's no way to measure this, especially in the residential class. So as you get more and more smart meters, you'll be able to implement things like that send the appropriate price signals to customers for that. So 5 years from now, we would be having a very different conversation once you get your AMI and your smart meters in place on how that would work. I fully agree with you on that. And I guess you could use that as a argument as to why we don't have a huge jump in the customer fixed charge now, but kind of gradually move in that direction, recognizing that it's still, even for your minimal kilowatt hour users, does not cover their fixed cost of distribution.
So Russ, and can you also just validate, I believe locally you said that you've not seen more than a $20 fixed charge, right, from a competitive standpoint locally?
Right, yeah, there's some pages up front in the report that have area utilities your size, things like that. You would be at the high end of fixed charges for monthly customer charge for residential customers.
And how about the overall billing rate? Is that comparable because we have offset for kilowatt hour charges, or are you saying our costs would be considerably higher across all of our competitors?
No, we didn't do a local area rate comparable for this. Just on the fixed charge, we put that in there for informational purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Alice, the rates will probably go up, even though, as we saw in the first year, our cost of service, our revenue requirement has been met by a current forecasted rate collections.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't appear to be needing to raise rates, and yet we do, because a couple of changes are going to happen between 2020 and 2021. One is a further increase in the REC surcharge, and another is the implementation of the 2.5% return on rate base. And a third actually is moving of the customer care collection ratio from its very small nominal 0.0052 up to something that reflects what we're actually spending. Mm-hmm. For those programs. Previously, the very small amount, which collects, I don't know, $100,000 or $150,000 a year, was in the rates in the bills. And then CMLP had been paying the balance of the costs of the programs out of net income. Well, if now we hold net income constant, but we increase the surcharge for CARES such that it covers the costs of the programs, that's going to have the effect of raising bills as well. So there are a couple of pressures, upward pressures, that will tend to raise rates. I haven't done a full MWEC analysis, partly because we haven't settled on exactly what rates we're going to be charging, but that's something we could look at.
Mm-hmm. I understand that. I just wanted to make sure I understood as we increase the rate, the fixed cost rate, that there's a balance scale and our variable costs would go down because we're just shifting the rates from one part of our billing system to another, from a kilowatt hour or volumetric number to a fixed cost.
Correct.
Or you could say that we're shifting the cost from large users to smaller users.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I see another question raised around the transmission and capacity rates and why are they decreasing in the future years under the TOR? Laura, Russ, can you speak to that?
Let me go back to that slide here. That would be because as the fixed cost increases, this increase is relating to the distribution and energy charges are fixed in the sense that those costs are put in a separate pot and then calculated based on the expected usage in each customer class. The capacity and transmission are related to the meter charge and the demand charge. So as we move more costs to the fixed charge, these come out of the variable costs of the capacity and transmission charge.
I'm sorry, I need clarification. The transmission and capacity costs are variable? I thought those were fixed. You're paying for wires, basically, and that's
Right.
infrastructure.
You know, we look at this in the cost of service, you look at this as an entire, or rate design piece, you look at this as a pot of, you know, how are we going to recover all those costs? So we're going to recover those costs through a combination of fixed charges and variable charges. So as we increase those fixed charges, for that pot of cost, the variable piece gets decreased. Hopefully I explain that okay.
So the meter charge increases you see going across the top, the subsequent decreases that everyone's been talking about here that need to be seen have been taken out of the capacity and transmission line rather than the distribution or energy line.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Ross, can I just do a time check? I don't know if you had more in your presentation. I just want to do a quick time check.
Right, I realize I'm past my time here, and so let me just, I could cruise through the rest of this, or you could read it. I think it's probably part of your board packet as well. Our observations and recommendations we kind of talked about as we go through here, and just to close up here, we're going to make one more final edit to the rates and then issue our final report. And then as part of this, as I said earlier, you have the model, you'll have the model, rate model, cost of service model, revenue requirement model, and you'll be able to use that in future rate analysis. But and before we do that, and Laura's been, you know, very deep into the model, but we're going to have a training session with her so that you know, these models are custom made and they have a lot of moving parts. So we're going to have a background session and discussion on that as well. So you can look for our final edit and then our final report in the next couple of weeks here.
So Russ, is there anything else you wanted to highlight? I didn't mean to cut you off, but was there anything of significance in your slides that we skipped?
No, I don't believe we did. Again, more data will lead to better rates. And, you know, I admire your progressiveness when it comes to some of these rate classes. It's very cool to work with you on this project. And I thank Laura for all her input and the chance to work with you folks. And thank you very much.
I just want to raise one question. I know Janice said he's asked this now twice, but I just want to discuss it. And the question is, have we looked at the impact of higher winter rates on the cost of operating a heat pump and heat pump adoption? I think I don't know the answer to that one, but I don't know, Laura, if you want to comment on our approach to that.
So is the question, have we looked at the impact?
Yes, of higher winter rates.
Okay, I would say that we've looked at it but not quantified it. In other words, when Baker Tilly first came out with the proposal to split seasons, make, you know, winter summer seasonal rates, to be honest with you, I wasn't sure that that was a great idea, only because the differential between the summer and winter energy rates in the ISO New England is not huge. It's a couple pennies at most, a penny to a penny and a half. And I thought, you know, that to increase so much more complexity into our system, you know, it's complex enough, but now to have summer and winter rates be different, maybe wasn't worth the extra rate clarity you would get around a penny and a half to 2 cents. But we decided, that was Baker Tilly's recommendation. So we decided, okay, we'll move forward with that. I mean, it would produce more accurate cost of service rates. It would be more accurately align what people are causing, have the people who are causing the rates to cost more be the ones who pay more. And so winter users, you may have looked at it that, yeah, it's been more of a boon in the past because they've been riding on the backs of average summer winter rates. And clearly in my mind, I mean, I think this is going to have a negative impact on that, but we have not sat down and tried to quantify what that might be. It's not going to be huge because, as I said, the summer winter rate differential was not that big.
So maybe more analysis of what that is to understand the potential impact. But to your point, our goal is to align to a cost of service. So that's consistent with that philosophy. So, okay. Are there additional questions that the board has for Russ?
Yeah,
on this study?
if you don't mind, Wendy, I just wanted to direct the board's attention to the page in the study that calls for a sustained increase in the cost of solar distribution. This is a per capacity fee that the owner of a solar array pays for the privilege of connecting to Concord's grid. And the study doesn't support or analyze it. It says, hey, we were given this analysis, so we're just taking it as a given. And the report calls for a year-on-year increase in those fees, even though at the same time we're increasing the meter fee to $20. So Russ, you just did that basically without analysis, is that right?
The change in those fees are based on the change in the revenue requirement from year to year. And the analysis of that was out of the scope of our engagement.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any additional questions? Russ, thank you very much for your presentation and of course the study, and Laura for all the work you guys have put into it. It's certainly a lot of analysis and a lot of good thought put into all of it. So thank you very much. It's very helpful.
We do have Pamela Dritt with her hand raised.
Sorry. Pamela? I don't know what that question was. Let me just look. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Gordon entirely. And I think it's imperative that we realize that the whole purpose of doing this is to build incentives into the rate system, get people to do the right thing for the whole community. And that includes, we want to incentivize people to invest in solar installations and to shift their electric usage away from the peak times and to adopt electric vehicles and heat pumps. And any time we incentivize doing the wrong thing, like give people a flat rate for all vehicle charging without consideration of when it happens, then we're paying people to do the wrong thing. And I think we should give people the freedom to do the wrong thing, but we should charge them for it so that the rest of us do not carry their extra costs. And that means that Doug should not be paying this connection thing for solar residents. Should be absolutely a good financial deal for anyone who's willing to put the money into putting a residential solar installation on, because it benefits the whole town for every bit. And we should not, I think the points that Doug brought up, Gordon, I apologize, brought up were excellent and important. And we should not have any discouragement charges for solar installations. And the idea that we would be paying on a one-to-one basis when solar energy is put into the grid of what it would cost to bring it back out. That's excellent. That's important also, because that will allow people to make money by making their house into a little solar energy power plant.
Okay. Thank you, Pamela. Appreciate your comments as always. We'll take that into consideration. So at this time, I'd like to move on in our agenda. And Peggy, I'll just acknowledge, I know that you need to drop at 9, so do what you need to do when you need to do it. So moving on, the next agenda item was to speak to the updated rate tariff sheets. Dave, I don't know if you and Laura want to speak to that.
Yeah, before we do that, David Allen has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, okay. I missed that. I'm still missing it. David, are you ready to?
Hopefully unmuted.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks. On this question of correcting the size of the fixed charge compared with the variable, as most of us know, this has been a discussion now for a decade. We also know, as has already been stated in the discussion this morning, that when the fixed charge goes up, the variable portion goes down. That is to say, no more money is being collected. It's been really settled logic since the beginning of this that there will be an untoward impact on the really small users, and there has to be an adjustment to accommodate that. That once again has been known for a long time. There has been a question raised here about whether or not this would allow the large user suddenly to shift all of theirs onto others, certainly onto the smaller. Of course, the reality is that while other users, including the small users, would pay a correct fixed charge, the large, certainly those very large homes, would still continue to pay very large amounts based on the correct variable charge. And I'll say once again, yes, to do this, there has to be an accommodation for the small user. And there actually, I don't believe, is any reason why we shouldn't go to that immediately, once again, with the correct adjustment for the smaller users. And I hope that we will be serious about this in this cycle of the discussion. We've been at this discussion for a decade. Unless there's logic otherwise, we need to move forward and get this right. Thanks.
Thank you, David, as usual. I don't believe there's any more hands, but David, you'll tell me if that's true. Okay.
No, you're good to go.
Okay, all right. So let's move on to the discussion. I know that you have distributed the rate tariff sheets that relate to the rec surcharge that we approved last month. Do you want to speak to that specifically?
So, yeah, I mean, this is going to be quick. It should be quick. These tariff sheets basically reflect the vote that the board took to add the half a penny to the energy charge. And so, you know, in the past, we hadn't brought these to the board, but we did have some questions about language and whatnot in tariffs. And so we thought it was appropriate to bring the tariff sheets that reflect what you guys voted on to get a vote, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Laura, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Laura made the adjustments to them based on the last meeting.
Laura, can you speak to that? I know I went through them. I saw the specific rate changes, but were there other changes that are worth calling out for folks if they didn't review all of them? Laura, are you there? You look like you're muted.
There she is.
There she is.
Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Nope.
So in addition to just the robo half cent that was added to each of the tariff sheets, which is pretty self-explanatory and probably doesn't call for a lot of discussion, There were a few wording changes to address other deficiencies in the tariff sheets that I would like to bring to your attention. The first one has to do with the R7 residential service, electric resistance, and heat pump heating system, domestic hot water rate. And if you have that in front of you, scroll down to character of service.
Character of service, yep.
The prior language had gone to great lengths to try to explain to customers reading these rates how the systems would be wired from the CMLP perspective. And things changed. This wasn't changed, and it became incorrect. When I reread it, I wanted to take the approach that I didn't think it was necessary for the customer to have to get into the nitty-gritty of what CMLP has to do to make this happen, but really to write it from their perspective. And so we've said that, you know, a separate meter will be installed by the CMLP, which will record the usage of the electric resistance and or heat pump space heating system. And we don't mention whether it's going to be in series or not in series with the normal billing meter. That's like a technical term. Use recorded on this meter from October 1st through April 30th. That was another error that people wanted us to change. Will be billed at the rate indicated below. And it doesn't talk about what happens when you have a subtractive meter. It just says, look, we're going to set up a separate meter to your heat pump. It's going to measure the heat pump use. And in the winter, you'll get billed at this rate below. And then from May 1st through September 30th, another date change, the use through the meter will be added to the usage recorded by the house meter and billed under the rate R1 or appropriate tariff. So this is meant to simplify what was there, to correct some of the dates, to be more self-explanatory to people. Most people expect the end of a time period to end on September 30th, not on October 1st.
Yeah.
So we had those changes plus the half cent. That was it for that rate.
So Laura, these changes look good to me, and I think we should approve it. I just would point out that the Baker-Tilly study suggested that the winter period end on May 30th, not April 30th. But which is, so then it'd be a little confusing to change this date again. I think that they should all fall on the same boundary. But I'm willing to kick that decision down, that can down the road.
Yeah, I thought about that. It's a great point, Gordon. I thought about that, but since we're going to be needing to change all the rates again,
yeah,
on January 1st, I thought we might as well put this change and language change through, and because we need the penny, we need the half cent, right?
Yeah.
And we needed clarification on these billing time periods. Just put this through, and then if and when we adopt the new summer winter definitions, we would have to go back through here and change the dates again.
And then just briefly, in a well-insulated house like ours, we make the switch from heating to cooling in April. The May 30th date is, in our house anyways, we're not heating in May. So it's not even necessary, I don't think, to, anyway, so I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I believe the selection of the June, September mirrors the definition of summer according to the ISO New England.
Yeah.
Okay. Lynn or Alice, do you have any other questions on the rate sheets? I read them as well and didn't have any additional questions. I think they seem pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and these are to go into effect September 1st.
Yeah. So can I entertain a motion to accept these rates as presented, distributed?
Move to accept the rate sheets as presented this morning.
Thanks, Lynn. Any second?
Second.
Thanks, Alice. All right, I'll take a roll call. Gordon?
Yes.
Okay, Wendy's yes. Lynn?
Yes.
Alice?
Yes.
All right, all approved. Thank you very much. All right, great. Thank you, Laura. All right, and then moving on to our next topic is about suspending the rate stabilization refund. Dave, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, let me, I'm going to share something real quick.
Okay.
So, you know, essentially we collected rate stabilization and we did that for a number of years, knowing we're going to offset some capacity and transmission peaks. This chart here shows us collecting it, and then in June of 2017, we started distributing it back to the ratepayers. You can see the fund is just about depleted. I'm pleased that the plan worked as designed, almost perfectly. So it's time to suspend the give back that you see on your bill right now. And if you look at the bottom part of this, it kind of gives you what we collected and the balances and monthly reductions. And as of June 31st, the balance in that rate stabilization was $71,000. That will be completely gone at the end of this month, and we're asking for the board to suspend the rate stabilization give back as we've depleted the funds.
Dave, just to clarify, we'll keep the fund itself, but it will not obviously be funded through any rate or et cetera, right? We're not retiring the fund.
No, it always sits there.
Yep.
It gets implemented when it's needed, and that goes through the board recommendation on a collection for X amount of years, and then a give back. But, you know, it's really part of the power supply fund if you think about it in that regard as you look at the budget. So essentially, you know, we're at the end of the 7-year process with this rate stabilization. You know, we started collecting it in 2013 and we just suspended, and, you know, it didn't supposed to. So what I'm looking for here is for the board to vote to suspend the give back of the rate stabilization. And, you know, if the board doesn't, we're going to start pulling money out of the power supply fund on a give back, and we shouldn't be doing that.
Dave, question, are we drawing this down to zero?
It should be close to zero, and if it isn't, the balance will be put into the power supply fund, which is money anyway. So, you know, in theory, we can't get it down to zero, 100. You know, I mean, it's not possible, but you can get it close to it, and we're pretty much there at this point. If we go over a little bit, that money would be pulled from the power supply fund, which is the ratepayers' money anyway. So the short answer is yes, it's going to be close to zero, one side of it or the other.
It will be zero eventually, right? Because you'll transfer it. So
it will be, yeah, it will be put into the power supply fund and balance left.
Okay. All right. Well, it's sort of a beautiful picture, and it did just what it was intended to do. So I certainly would support doing to discontinue the rate relief from this fund. So can I entertain a motion to discontinue that refund?
So I move to discontinue the rate stabilization fund.
We do have one hand up.
Sorry. Question?
It's from Pamela Dritt.
Okay. And is this related to the rate fund, or is this a question about the off-peak? I seem to have a delay in my...
Actually, I think we already talked about this, Pamela's question. Jana Setti asked the same thing.
Clarified it. Okay.
Is that right?
Yes, we did.
Okay. It was 12 a.m. versus 12 p.m. Is that?
Yeah.
That's not my question. The question is, why is it starting so late? I know that we should have the off-peak hours as expensive as we can, but do we need to start it at midnight? For a lot of electric vehicle owners, we are asleep at midnight, we need, if we have control over what we're using, we'd like to be able to start it at like 8 o'clock when it doesn't actually cost the town anything.
You know, most vehicles you can program, you can plug them in and they can.
Yes, but you can't do that for like your washing machine or laundry. You should be able to use, you know, the dryer in the evening at off-peak rates, shouldn't you?
So that's something that the board consider in terms of the timing. You don't need to make a decision on that today.
Right. So we'll hold that for future discussion, but Pamela, I appreciate your comment, and that's, I think, part of our discussion to follow.
Thanks.
So let me go back. We were in the middle of trying to take a vote to suspend the refund. I had a motion and a second. Can I just take a roll call? Alice?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
And Wendy agrees as well, and I know that Peggy has had to drop, so thank you. So that is approved, Dave. I want to keep going because keep us on time to be done by 9:25. The next update is the telecommunications update, Dave.
Okay, I'm just letting Greg come in.
Oh, okay.
He's going to be, he's the phone number there, but he's having problems with his microphone on his laptop.
Yep, on his phone, looks
So,
like.
Greg, I got you in there. If you can unmute, you can give the telecom update. Okay. I might be doing the update. Let's see in a second. Greg, are you able to unmute?
Can you unmute him, Dave?
Yeah, I tried.
Okay.
Hold on a second. He's
Texting.
yeah. All right. Let me I'll just do the update. Let me just open up my So it's been a little bit of time since we gave a telecom update. Thought it was probably a good time to kind of just, you know, give the board a quick update. And essentially, you know, the team's been busy. You know, we have 1,447 active customers at this point. So, you know, we're on the rise. We're definitely not going to meet the numbers that we thought we would, and that's primarily because of COVID and the slowdown of installations because of it. But, you know, of those just over 1,400 customers, there's 1,309 residential customers that are broadband customers, and there's 138 businesses. The team just completed the installation of a fiber service to the town of Carlisle for their emergency radio services. So that's a new revenue source that we hadn't had. That worked out well. The team has been working on providing wireless communications to the Douglas White Field behind the school. So we installed fiber up to the field. The fiber's lit, and we're in the next phase of getting the Wi-Fi set up. So that's been a pretty big project. But we weren't planning on it, but you know, given where we are, we're able to provide that, and I think we're going to test it in the next couple of weeks, and it should work well. So you know, it's been a big lift, but we're getting there. During the COVID, we did see an increase in traffic, and we still are. On the internet side, we did increase our bandwidth. I mentioned that, a couple meetings ago, and we're averaging just under 50% of capacity. So we're in really good shape with that. No worries that we don't have enough capacity, which was the concern. We went up probably 35% when the pandemic hit, and we kept a close eye on it because we needed to make sure we recovered properly. The team has been doing installations. We started out with doing installations for essential services, so if you had a doctor that was doing telehealth, we prioritized those things. They've completed 39 installations during the pandemic. We have to follow a whole process to ensure their safety going into homes and such, and we've done that, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward. We've had, of the backlog of customers that want to be hooked up, we have about 40 customers that want our services but have asked us to wait until we're through the COVID crisis. So, we've, said the problem, we kept that list, and we'll reach back to them, as we move forward. But that's essentially where we are with broadband at this point. We need to take a look at the revenues and the expenses and kind of see where we are. But I think we're probably going to be a little under the revenues we forecasted in the budget, just based on, that 3 months of really only doing, emergency work. So, I think at year end, the board should expect the numbers to be off, as you probably expect with the electric side as well.
So Dave, the backlog of 40 customers, would you expect to get through that by year end? I know at some point you stopped because of the winter months, but.
Yeah, so when you get into December, January, February, it can be difficult to splice not enough slack in the fiber. If there's enough slack, you can bring it down into the van and do the work. You can't splice it in the cold. So we generally slow down there, and if we have snow, a lot of it, sometimes it's difficult to get the truck positioned on the roadway with the snowbank. So that's where we see the decrease typically. So, the backlog of 40, we've communicated with each one of those customers. So it's really when they're comfortable with us coming in. And, if we get through the pandemic by year end and they say, hey, we're ready, and it's January, then it's going to be, is it warm enough for us to do the work? And, or is there enough slack in the fiber to do it in the van? But 40 customers is a significant amount. And it'll take a little time to go through and get all done. But the good thing is we've talked to each and every one of them, whether it be on the phone or email, and they're comfortable with waiting.
Thank you.
So Dave, do I understand that the Wi-Fi for Doug Whitefields is to support town meeting, or was there another purpose?
No, it is to support town meeting.
Yeah.
I probably should have said that in my report. It is support town meeting. We haven't tested it yet. That's coming, and the primary function will be for the moderator and town staff. We do have hopes that it will be available for our guest network as well. And we also have Comcast mobile Wi-Fi coming as well. So there should be sufficient communication on the field during the meeting.
Okay. And have you hired a telecommunications director yet?
Yeah, Greg is the director who's having
Okay.
technical difficulties right now. I had a feeling this was going to happen. We had a problem yesterday with his new laptop, and it's clearly not corrected yet, but we'll get that fixed. And I was hoping he was able to introduce himself and you guys.
I was hoping that's who Greg was, but I didn't know.
But yeah, no, he's been with us since March, so he's getting acclimated. I will say we've thrown a lot at him since March, and you know it's been a challenge because we have two teams and Greg's on the opposite team that I'm on, so it's all been Zoom meetings and phone calls. So,
Yep.
But he's done a good job. He's been working on a number of different things, and I'm happy to have him as part of the team.
Great.
Well, welcome aboard, Greg. I guess we'll have to meet you at a future meeting. Dave, while we're on staffing topic, what's the status of the CIO interviews? I think that was one thing we talked about last time.
Yeah, so we had 94 applicants. We narrowed it down to 7 to be interviewed, with 8 more candidates that were qualified, met the job descriptions, but the 7 were the front runners. We narrowed that down to 4 candidates for second round and presentations. They had an exercise to do. 1 dropped out and 3 continued on. And Stephen is in the process of checking references and things of that nature. So we're I'm crossing my fingers that we're successful. But I will say that the candidates that we brought in for first round and second round were very good candidates. We had a great pool. So with any luck, we'll have the position filled in the next month or 2.
Good. Well, it's a nice position to be in, to be able to pick from good options. So
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah, so hopefully it works out. It's been a lot. And,
Yeah. A lot of work. So,
yeah, a
thank
lot
you.
of work, but going through the 94 applications and ranking them, it was a big lift. I did have help from IT Guardian,
Yeah.
one of our consultants there, Jason.
Good.
It's good. So
Great. All right. Well,
Hey, could I ask a question before we wind down?
Sure, Lynn.
I guess this is to Laura. Given the presentation we had today of the cost of service study and given the new concepts that have been raised with us, what is your expectation for the next meeting or 2?
So I believe you all have now access to the written rate design recommendation report.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so that clearly has a lot more information in it than was presented today.
Right.
And I would think that we'd want you to be able to absorb that information and think about it a bit and come up with any questions or suggestions that you have. We have one more shot to have Baker Tilly revise both the cost of service model and the rate design recommendations and the rates based on feedback from the board. So I left that as a placeholder, like they needed to come up with the first draft, the second draft, and then after the board reviewed it, there would be potential for further modifications to be made. So I guess it depends on how quickly you all can kind of turn that around.
So to that point, Laura, I mean, I know I had some questions. Some of them were definitely answered today. I was waiting for this presentation. But Lynn, I know that you and Peggy in particular, in theory, September is your last meeting being on the board, and we really want to get your input. So it may be very helpful to, if you have specific questions, if you could document them and share them with Laura so that we can make sure they're addressed.
It would be good, I think, if we set a deadline for comments to be received so that Baker Tilly would have time to turn around any revisions by the next meeting. I guess that's the way it needs to work, right?
Well, I mean,
revisions or questions? Sorry, go ahead, Laura.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of timing, I think we're thinking about implementing these rates January 1st.
Right.
Well, I'm just going to jump in there. I think one it's important to keep in mind is, you know, with time of use, we need smart meters, and we have to get, you know, the RFP out to get the consultant in to help us. So it could be kind of a hybrid model of what the board adopts for January 1, and it could be January 1 of 2021 that time of use goes into effect. It really, we can't do that without time of use meters, I guess is the key piece.
Here without
But
meters.
I'm assuming that's a big topic. That's my one question is sort of, we don't have tour, I mean, we can't put these rates as presented in for January 1 unless we are making some other assumptions. So
Actually, we can. What we would be putting in would be the new R1 that
right,
has winter and summer broken out
Right.
and does not have the incremental 4% fee tacked onto it that it will when we have time of use rates. So
the fact that we would not have all the folks on tour that you might have expected, does that impact the setting of that rate? Because you would otherwise expect more people on the tour rate in aggregate? I mean, this is the balance of assumptions about users in each of the rate categories now. So I'm not sure.
right. So I guess what I'm saying is the rate that we would be proposing to be put into effect January 1st of 2021
Right.
would be the residential R1 rate that you see in the report.
Okay, so the fact that in a future state, the mix of customers isn't influencing that rate is part of your recommendation right now.
I'm not sure I'm following that, Wendy.
So I guess, and maybe this is more discussion in September. So this is designed to move into a tour rate. I don't know what assumptions were in the rate study about the number of users on the tour rate come January 1st, and then in 22, 23, 24, 25. So from a revenue perspective, you have assumptions about users in each one of those rate classes. And maybe we can start with 2021, but then the rates have to be revised again when the mix starts changing. Is that not appropriate?
Yes, but
Okay.
but coming up front here, I don't know that we would, you know, we're not going to have the opt-out time of use rate. It's just going to be the R1 rate that would go into effect on January 1st.
Okay, so that's the
So
rate.
is your expectation that we will have a rate hearing at our September meeting?
So that's
I don't-
really for the board to decide, you know, when they want to do it. But, you know, I think we need to have a rate hearing to do it, Lynn. I think you're correct. The question is, you know, do we feel that we're going to be ready in September or
Right.
not? And that's really what you guys need to kind of think about. We don't have to do it in September. We could do it in October or November. But, you know, we want to have enough time to reach out, do a rate hearing, get feedback from the citizens, digest that, and then adjust if we need to and make a decision and vote. So, you know, there's a little bit to do still, you know, but to Lynn's point, there's a few steps that need to be taken before the board would vote on this.
Okay.
So back to Lynn's recommendation about next steps, I think getting questions to Laura is important. We have 3 weeks before the next meeting. Would September 2nd be sufficient for the board to get feedback to Laura, or should we say maybe Friday the 28th? Is that,
If you can do it by the 28th, that would give us a little more time to digest, you know. So I'd make that as a target, but
okay.
if you guys are tied up and we get something later from one or two of you, we'll deal with it.
Okay.
I'd say no later than
Okay.
the first date you put out there.
Okay. All right. And the focus is predominantly the R1 rate, but any questions, obviously, in the whole study and assumptions are what we're looking for feedback on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gordon, you're on mute.
Gordon, you're
I
on.
look at this situation and I think, I'm not sure you guys would really have a plan for migrating, say, my household to this new setup. Because I have every kind of meter you could already have. I've got a solar and a heat pump. I guess I don't have an EV. and how would all this stuff play together in the new scheme? So I just feel like as if that's an exercise I'm asking you to do for me, but actually you need to do it for everybody. We have a very complex set of rates and meters and systems, and like, for instance, hot water or ETS. I think it's worth taking some time to thinking about how each of those would get migrated to the new scheme. We don't need to do that now. I'm not asking for an answer now, but this would be part of the rollout. I'd also suggest that there may be some households in town now that have smart meters. Could you actually implement the new tour on the handful of houses that are currently capable of supporting it? So anyway, just something to think about. We don't need to talk about it right now, but there's something I want to be hearing about at other meetings.
So Gordon, just quickly on that, we have about 10% of our customers smart meters. If we were going to roll out time of use with them, it would have to be an opt-in for right now.
Yeah, right.
We can't do it across the entire system. So to avoid rate discrimination, things of that nature, they would say, yeah, we want to give it a shot. And we could do that.
All right.
Can I ask, is it possible to get a printed copy, a hard copy of the Baker Tilly report? I'm finding it very difficult to cross-reference and take notes on a digital copy. And unfortunately, my little printer at home is overwhelmed by large documents with graphs.
We absolutely can print
If we can just make a photocopy, I'd be happy to stop by and pick it up.
Yep.
Thank you.
I would appreciate that too. Thanks. That's a good idea. I'm trying. I just print out pieces.
Right.
Yeah, I'll print them out. I'll print out 5 copies, and we'll either you can pick them up or we can deliver them either way.
Okay.
Happy to stop by.
Thank you.
Thank you. That would make my job a lot easier, I think.
All right.
I've already printed one, so don't do one for me.
Okay.
I don't need one either.
Okay. All right. I'll check with Peggy to give her an update.
And I just want to say I was very impressed by the report. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not as smart as you are, but I'll work at it.
I just want to give Laura credit. I mean, this has been a big project, and she's really done a good job managing it and with Baker Tilly. So thank her for that.
Thank you.
Your expertise.
So Gordon, can I take that to mean you've read it cover to cover?
I only made it to page 100.
Are you going to be having a long list of questions for me?
Really, the main question I have is, what's the definition of demand charge? Is that coincident demand, or the peak usage for a user in a given billing period, or over an annual period, or what?
Yeah, I can help you with that.
Okay.
So it's over a monthly period, and it's not coincident.
It's what?
Well,
It's
depends
monthly?
what the infrastructure is. If it's for assessing peak FCM costs from the independent system operator, then it is the coincident peak that's assessed once a year. If it's for the local distribution resources, then as David said, it's a monthly non-coincident peak factor that is considered.
Yeah, and that's the way the peak the demand charges are set up right now for commercial customers.
So commercial customers pay the non-coincident peak.
Correct.
Yeah, which is, I think, a better reflection of our local costs, right? Things like depreciation. Well, anyway, let's not go into it. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. I want to recognize that we are over time on our meeting. I see that there's some questions here, but I want to be respectful of people's time, and maybe we can answer some of these questions separately. I think we answered the peak question, and then opt-out. Are we considering opt-out for people to accept smart meters? Yes, people are resistant to change. There's some comments here, so we can include these in our minutes.
These will be in the minutes.
Yeah, okay. All right, any additional comments from the board? I don't think we've had any liaison meetings, so. No. Okay, well, I would entertain a motion to bring the meeting to a close.
Move to adjourn.
All right, second.
I'll second that.
All right, all in, well, I guess I have to roll call this one too. Alice?
Yes.
Yeah. Lynn?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
All right, Wendy, yes. All right, well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for the report, and I'll follow up with Peggy on minutes and sending questions.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.